Hello and welcome to Indus News, live from Islamabad. I'm Naila Shuja and these are the headlines. The United States has called for an end to violence in Afghanistan, blaming the Taliban for much of the bloodshed. Talking to reporters, State Department spokesperson Ned Price urged all sides to engage in serious negotiations for a political settlement. Meanwhile, the Taliban have claimed to capture 4 more districts as fighting rages on across the country. The United States has seized 36 websites of Iranian state media, Yemeni Houthis TV channel, and Iraqi militia groups for violating sanctions on Tehran. In a statement, the Justice Department also accused the websites of targeting the U.S. with disinformation campaigns. Last year, U.S. prosecutors also seized a network of Iranian Revolutionary Guards' 92 web domains. China has condemned a U.S. warship's latest transit through the Taiwan Strait, calling Washington the region's greatest security risk creator. The People's Liberation Army says the U.S. is playing the same old tricks and disrupting the peace in the strait. Meanwhile, the U.S. Navy says the guided missile destroyer USS Curtis Wilbur conducted a routine transit. Brazil has reported over 2,100 deaths from COVID-19 and nearly 88,000 infections overnight. Meanwhile, the Brazilian prosecutors have opened a probe into irregularities in a vaccine contract with an Indian firm. In Pakistan, 39 people have lost their lives to the virus and 930 tested positive in the past 24 hours. Globally, the virus has claimed more than 3.8 million lives and infected over 179 million people so far. For more news and details, stay tuned. We'll be right back after a short break. Welcome back. The United States has called for an end to violence in Afghanistan, blaming the Taliban for much of the bloodshed. Talking to reporters, State Department spokesperson Ned Price urged all sides to engage in serious negotiations for a political settlement. He termed the peace talks between the Kabul government and the Taliban the only way to end the 40 years of war. Meanwhile, the Taliban have claimed to capture 4 more districts in Patika, Ghazni, and Badakhshan provinces. A Taliban spokesperson said they have arrested 150 Afghan soldiers and seized several vehicles and ammunition. In Kandahar, Afghan police said 5 civilians were killed and 20 more wounded last night in a roadside blast. So far, no group has claimed responsibility for the attack. U.S. Senator Lindsey Graham has warned that ignoring Pakistan while withdrawing from Afghanistan could lead to a disaster. In a series of tweets, Graham said that Washington cannot pull out effectively without coordinating with Islamabad. He cautioned that ignoring Pakistan on the issue will be a major disaster, worse than the blunder in Iraq. The Republican criticized the Biden administration for believing that America's problems in Afghanistan have ended. Graham added that Biden's reluctance to reach out to Pakistan's Prime Minister Imran Khan is stunning. Iran has called for an immediate de-escalation of tensions in Afghanistan. In a tweet, a foreign ministry spokesperson said that Tehran is closely watching the worrying developments in Kabul. Saeed Khatibzadeh added that Iran favors a comprehensive Afghan dialogue. He stressed that the destructive U.S. policies have left long-term consequences in the region. Khatibzadeh blamed Washington's irresponsible conduct for the worsening situation. The United States has seized 36 websites of Iranian state media, Houthis TV channel, and Iraqi militia groups for violating sanctions on Tehran. In a statement, the Justice Department accused the websites of targeting the U.S. with disinformation campaigns. The department noted a U.S. company owned the 33 domains used by the Iranian Islamic Radio and Television Union. It said 3 websites were operated by Katiba Hizballah, which has been designated a foreign terrorist organization by the U.S. The department said none of them obtained a license from U.S. Treasury prior to using the domain names. Several of the sites were back online within hours of new domain addresses. Last year, U.S. prosecutors also seized a network of Iranian Revolutionary Guard's 92 web domains. China has condemned a U.S. warship's latest transit of the Taiwan Strait, calling Washington the region's greatest security risk creator. The U.S. Navy has been conducting such operations in the sensitive waterway on a regular basis now. The People's Liberation Army said it monitored the U.S. vessel throughout its passage and warned it. It added the U.S. is playing the same old tricks and disrupting the peace in the strait. Meanwhile, the U.S. Navy said the guided missile destroyer USS Curtis Wilbur conducted a routine transit. The Navy reiterated that the transit demonstrates the U.S. commitment to a free and open Indo-Pacific. The United States says it will continue to seek dialogue with North Korea over its nuclear program. This comes a day after the North Korean leader Kim Yo-jong rejected an early resumption of talks. State Department spokesperson Ned Price said Pyongyang's remarks have not changed the U.S. view on diplomacy. Price said a calibrated, practical, and open approach is needed for the denuclearization of the Korean peninsula. He reiterated Washington's offer to meet anywhere, anytime, without preconditions. The spokesperson said the United States continues to hope that North Korea will respond positively to its outreach. Pakistan has urged the international community to hold India accountable for human rights violations in occupied Kashmir. Pakistan's mission to the UN also demanded action over the marginalization of minorities in India. At the 47th session of the Human Rights Council in Geneva, it cited the custodial death of Kashmiri leader Ashraf Zarai in May. The mission also mentioned the killing of dozens of Muslims last year in New Delhi. It said India is silencing Kashmiri right activists who speak out against the illegal demographic changes in the occupied territory. In Indian-occupied Kashmir, a Hindu mob has lynched a deaf-to Muslim man when he was returning home after buying a cow in the Rajouri district. Two others accompanying the 24-year-old escaped without a major injury. This is the latest in a spat of cow vigilante attacks that have raised alarm among religious minorities. Earlier on Sunday, 3 Muslims were beaten to death by mobs in the Indian state of Tripura. Police allege the victims were caught as they were trying to smuggle cattle. Illegal Israeli settlers have stormed East Jerusalem's Sheikh Jarrah neighborhood. They have threatened to forcefully expel 3 Palestinian families from their homes within 1 month. Israeli parliamentarian, police, and the head of extremist Jewish settlement organization also accompanied the settlers. In Nablus City, the Israeli army handed demolition orders targeting 20 Palestinian homes as well as a mosque. Israeli police also forced a Palestinian to demolish his 3-story building in the town of Al-Iswaya in occupied Jerusalem. Earlier, dozens of Israeli settlers forced their way into the Al-Aqsa Mosque complex. A recent study has found that over 30,000 U.S. troops have committed suicide since 2001. The study by Brown University shows the number is 4 times higher than those killed in actual combat. This report, researcher Thomas Ben-Sud has just above 7,000 troops were killed in post-9/11 war operations. The report reads the increasing rates of suicide in military personnel are outpacing those of the general population. The study cites trauma, stress, military's masculine culture, access to guns, and public indifference as major causes. Meanwhile, U.S. Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin has backed removing the prosecution of sexual assault from the military's chain of command. The Pentagon report estimated over 20,000 male and female service members experienced sexual assault in 2018. Brazil has reported over 2,100 deaths from COVID-19 and nearly 88,000 infections overnight. Globally, the virus has claimed more than 3.8 million lives and infected over 179 million people so far. More in this report. As vaccine shortages driven by global financial disparity continue to mar the fight against the pandemic, the Delta variant of COVID-19 threatens to erase all gains. A dramatic rise in infections has gripped Russia, which reported the highest number of daily deaths since early February. America's top immunologist, Anthony Fauci, has termed the Delta variant as the greatest threat to the U.S. efforts to eliminate the virus. The White House says the United States will likely fail to meet President Joe Biden's goal to deliver at least one vaccine to 70% of adults by the 4th of July.
Well, we don't see it exactly like something went wrong. How we see it is we set a bold, ambitious goal, something the president has done from the very beginning. And we are expected to meet that goal just a couple weeks after July 4th. And in fact, at this point, as of today, we're going to be already at that point for people who are 30 years of age and older.
The World Health Organization says it is concerned about the easing of restrictions by nations hosting Euro 2020 matches. The global health watchdog noted that some states are already seeing rising cases. Meanwhile, New Zealand has raised alert levels in its capital, Wellington, one level short of a lockdown, over the possible presence of the dangerous Delta variant.
We just held a special cabinet meeting, and out of an abundance of caution, the Wellington region will move to alert level 2 from 6 p.m. tonight. And that will run through at this point until 11:59 p.m. on Sunday.
In India, authorities have declared a new coronavirus variant to be of a variant of concern and said nearly 24 cases were detected in 3 states. Meanwhile, Brazil's federal prosecutors have opened a probe into a contract worth $320 million for 20 million doses of a vaccine made by an Indian firm. Moreover, China reportedly plans to keep border restrictions in place for at least another year amid fears over the emergence of new variants. In Pakistan, COVID-19 has claimed 39 more lives over the past 24 hours. The health ministry says the death toll has surged to 22,075. It said that 930 people tested positive for the virus overnight. The ministry has reported over 950,000 cases and nearly 896,000 recoveries so far. It said there are over just 33,000 active cases in the country. The country has administered over 13.8 million vaccines so far. In Yemen, the Saudi-led coalition says it has intercepted and destroyed an explosive laden drone launched by the Houthi rebels. The coalition said that the drone was launched towards the Khamis Mushahid region in Saudi Arabia. The coalition added that it is taking operational measures to protect civilians and their properties from the attacks. The Houthi rebels have yet to comment on the incident. It's now time for a short break. Stay with us. Welcome back. Russia has reiterated unconditional support for Syria's sovereignty, unity, and territorial integrity. Russia's Deputy Prime Minister Yuri Borisov made the remarks in a meeting with Syrian President Bashar al-Assad in Damascus. Borisov reassured that Russia is ready to provide further comprehensive assistance to Syria. Meanwhile, Syrian media said al-Assad stressed the importance of continuing coordination with Russia. The meeting came just hours after the newly inducted British aircraft carrier claimed striking ISIS targets in Syria. In a statement, London said with new stealth jets, it is ready to deliver the hard punch of power against the enemy. Sudan has asked the UN Security Council to meet and discuss a dispute over a dam being built by Ethiopia on the Blue Nile. Sudan's Foreign Minister Mariam Sadiq al-Mahdi made the call in a letter to the Council's head. She urged the Council to immediately discuss the dam's impact on the security of millions of people. Sadiq al-Mahdi called on the Council head to urge Addis Ababa to stop the unilateral filling of the dam. Ethiopia is pinning its hopes for economic development and power generation on the Grand Ethiopian Renaissance Dam. However, the two downstream countries, Egypt and Sudan, seek a binding agreement on the filling and operation of the dam. China has called on the world countries to promote closer international cooperation on human rights. Chinese envoy to the UN office at Geneva, Chen Zhu, delivered a joint speech at the 47th UN Human Rights Session. He spoke on the behalf of nearly 20 countries, including Russia, Belarus, Venezuela, Iran, and Egypt. Chen highlighted the West's hypocrisy in interfering in other countries' internal affairs under the pretext of human rights. He called on the Human Rights Council to carry out its work in accordance with the UN General Assembly resolutions. The envoy stressed the need to adhere to the principles of multilateralism and upholding international justice. The United States administration says it will investigate the dark history of Indian boarding schools. This comes after 215 Indigenous children were found in a mass grave at a boarding school in Canada. Speaking at National Congress of American Indians, Interior Secretary Deb Haaland said the government will work to find the remains of children who died in the schools. Haaland acknowledged that U.S. agencies tried to eradicate Indigenous culture, language, spiritual practices, and people. She said the Interior Department is positioned to carry out the probe as it oversaw the schools.
Today, I'm announcing and sharing with you all, first, that the department will launch the Federal Indian Boarding School Initiative. At no time in history have the records or documentation of this policy been compiled or analyzed to determine the full scope of its reaches and effects. We must uncover the truth about the loss of human life and the lasting consequences of these schools.
The United Nations World Food Program says some 41 million people worldwide are at risk of famine. In a statement, the agency warned that inflation is compounding the pressure on food security. It said the UN needs to raise $6 billion immediately to reach those in risk in 43 countries. After declining for several decades, world hunger has been on the rise since 2016, driven by conflict and climate change. According to the World Food Program, 27 million people were on the brink of famine in 2019. But since 2020, the situation has worsened due to the COVID-19 pandemic. A mummy of an Egyptian man underwent a CT scan at a hospital in Milan as part of a research project. The remains of the mummy are believed to be belonging to an ancient Egyptian priest called Akhenaten. More in this report. Ancient Egypt met modern medical technology when a mummy underwent a CT scan at a Milan hospital. The project, A Mummy to be Saved, aims to shed light on the light of the mummified man and the ancient Egyptian burial customs.
It's a sort of virtual autopsy. We can do a sort of fly-through inside the mummy. So we can study the mummy, we can reconstruct the life and the death of this person. We can also be sure about the sex because we can study the pelvis and we can measure him so we can understand how high he was.
Medical staff also carried out chemical and physical analysis to understand the type of products were used to mummify the body. The mummy and its sarcophagus has been in Bergamo since 1885 and were donated by an Italian ambassador who was living in Egypt.
We are not sure exactly if this mummy is really the priest, because in the past, with the antiquity market, was quite frequent to associate a mummy to another coffin.
Researchers say the analysis will also allow them to study ancient diseases and could help modern-day medical research. For the latest news updates, you can follow us on our social media at Indus.News.